Imagine being pulled over on your way home from work. You've done nothing wrong. No broken taillight, no speeding, not even a cracked windshield. But the officer who stops you has already decided you're guilty of something. Minutes later, you find yourself in handcuffs, staring at a small bag of white powder you've never seen before. The officer swears he found it in your car. His body cam is rolling. But what you don't know is that this very camera will one day expose everything. This is the story of a man who came dangerously close to losing his freedom until a single piece of evidence changed everything. Marcus Hill was 32 years old, a warehouse supervisor, father of two, and a man who worked hard to stay out of trouble. He had no criminal record, no history with drugs, and no reason to believe his life could unravel on an ordinary Tuesday night. That evening, Marcus was driving home after picking up groceries for his family. His kids were waiting for dinner. His wife had texted him twice to hurry. He was less than 10 minutes away when he noticed the flashing red and blue lights in his rearview mirror. Confused, Marcus pulled over. Officer Daniel Cross stepped out of his cruiser. He was a veteran cop in the department, with a reputation. To many in the neighborhood, Cross wasn't seen as a protector. He was known for aggressive stops, questionable searches, and a habit of targeting young black men driving through certain areas. License and registration, Cross barked. Marcus handed them over calmly. "Is there a problem, officer?" Cross didn't answer. Instead, he leaned into Marcus's car, shining his flashlight around the seats, the floor mats, the glove compartment. Something in his behavior felt off, like he was already searching for something Marcus didn't even know existed. The stop dragged on. Cross asked Marcus to step out of the car. Marcus complied, though nervous. He'd seen enough stories on the news to know how quickly these encounters could turn tragic. Cross began searching the vehicle. Minutes later, his voice rang out. Well, what do we have here?" He held up a small plastic bag, white powder visible inside. Marcus's heart sank. His hand shook. "That's not mine. I don't do drugs. I've never." But Cross cut him off. "Save it for the judge." He radioed in the discovery, cuffed Marcus, and placed him under arrest. Marcus kept protesting, but the weight of the accusation crushed him. In that moment, he knew what so many innocent people had felt before, the terrifying realization that the truth didn't matter. Because right now, it was his word against an officer's. Marcus was booked at the county jail. His wife, Alicia, was frantic when she got the call. She couldn't believe it. The idea of her husband being caught with drugs was unthinkable. He barely drank alcohol, let alone touch narcotics. Yet the police report painted a damning picture. Controlled substance discovered during lawful search. Bail was set high. Marcus spent days behind bars, humiliated, terrified, and watching his reputation crumble. His employer suspended him pending investigation. Neighbors whispered. Even some relatives looked at him differently. All because of one bag. But here's the thing about modern policing. Many departments now require officers to wear body cameras. And Officer Cross? He had his running that night. At first, Marcus didn't think much about it. After all, Cross swore the drugs were in his car. What could a video prove? But Alicia insisted they request the footage through their lawyer. When the defense team finally obtained the files, what they found was shocking. The footage began with the stop. Cross approached the car, spoke with Marcus, then began his search. The camera angle shifted as he leaned inside, and that's when it happened. Clear as day, the video showed Cross pulling something from his own pocket. A small, crumpled plastic bag. He glanced around quickly, then tucked it under the driver's seat. Moments later, he discovered the very same bag and triumphantly held it up. It was all caught on tape. The proof Marcus had been begging for. Undeniable evidence that he was framed. But the story doesn't end there. When the footage was first presented, the prosecution didn't immediately drop the charges. Instead, they stalled. They claimed the footage was unclear, that perhaps Marcus had placed the drugs earlier and Cross was simply retrieving them. Cross himself swore he hadn't planted anything. His union backed him. His fellow officers closed ranks. For Marcus, it was a nightmare. Even with evidence in hand, the system wasn't eager to admit one of its own had broken the law. Alicia wasn't about to let her husband's life be destroyed quietly. She reached out to local media. She contacted civil rights groups. Soon, the footage made its way online. The clip went viral. Millions of people saw the moment Officer Cross slipped the bag under the seat. Public outrage exploded. Protests erupted outside the precinct. Social media lit up with hashtags demanding justice for Marcus. Commentators compared it to other cases where officers had abused their power. The department could no longer ignore it. Internal Affairs opened an investigation. Cross was placed on administrative leave with pay. For Marcus, the charges were finally dropped, but the damage had already been done. He'd lost his job. His reputation was scarred. His children had endured weeks of fear, wondering if their father would ever come home. And Cross, he walked free, pending investigation. The question remained, would the system hold him accountable or protect him once again? Because here's the twist. Officer Cross had more than one body cam video under review. In Marcus's case, it wasn't the first time suspicious discoveries had been made during his traffic stops. In fact, investigators soon uncovered a disturbing pattern, one that suggested Marcus was just one of many innocent people caught in Cross's web. What they found next would shock the entire community and expose a scandal far bigger than anyone imagined. Marcus Hill thought his nightmare was finally over. The body cam footage had cleared his name, and the charges were dropped. But what he didn't know was that his case was just the beginning. Because once investigators dug deeper into Officer Daniel Cross's record, they uncovered something chilling. Marcus wasn't the only one. Dozens of men and women, innocent people, had seen their lives destroyed in eerily similar ways. And every trail led back to the same officer. After Marcus's story went viral, the phone calls started. Community leaders, defense attorneys, even former arrestees reached out with stories that felt hauntingly familiar. Traffic stops that began with no clear violation. Searches that turned up drugs or paraphernalia no one admitted to owning. Cases where the evidence seemed to appear out of nowhere. For years, people had whispered about Officer Cross. Some thought he was just overly aggressive. Others suspected something darker. But no one had proof until Marcus's body cam video cracked the silence wide open. When Internal Affairs expanded their investigation, they found a disturbing pattern. Over the past 5 years, Officer Cross had reported more than 3 times the number of drug-related arrests compared to any other officer in his precinct. And nearly every one of those arrests followed the same script. A minor traffic stop, a vehicle search, a discovery of small amounts of narcotics. On paper, it made Cross look like a star cop, someone cleaning the streets and cracking down on crime. But in reality, his body cam videos told a very different story. One video in particular shocked investigators. It showed Cross pulling over a young college student named Terrence Miller. The stop was for failure to signal, though the video showed Terrence had used his blinker. Cross searched the car, and once again, a bag mysteriously appeared. But here's the twist. In this video, Cross didn't realize his body cam had already been activated before he reached the car. The footage captured him slipping the bag out of his vest pocket, moments before he even made contact with the driver. It was damning. Terrence had spent 6 months fighting drug charges before Marcus's case came to light. He'd lost his scholarship, his place on the basketball team, and nearly his future. He broke down in tears when shown the footage. "All this time, I thought my life was over," he whispered. And it was all a lie. And Terrence wasn't alone. Other victims came forward. A single mother who lost custody of her children. A factory worker fired from his job after a drug arrest. An immigrant facing deportation proceedings. One by one, their stories painted a picture of deliberate, calculated abuse of power. But exposing Cross wasn't easy. Inside the department, many officers refused to testify. Cross's union called the accusations a witch hunt, and prosecutors, embarrassed that they had pursued convictions based on his discoveries, were reluctant to reopen old cases. Even as the evidence piled up, the machine of the justice system seemed determined to protect itself, not the people it had harmed. Marcus watched in disbelief. "If I didn't have that body cam video, I'd still be in prison right now," he told reporters. How many others never got that chance? The turning point came when federal investigators stepped in. The FBI launched a civil rights probe into Officer Cross's activities. They seized his records, interviewed his former partners, and subpoenaed years of bodycam footage. What they found was staggering. Cross had planted evidence in at least 14 separate cases, and possibly more. Some of his victims had already served time. Others still carried felony convictions on their records. The scandal threatened to unravel not just one officer's career, but the credibility of the entire department. Finally, after months of mounting pressure, Daniel Cross was arrested. The charges included evidence tampering, perjury, obstruction of justice, and multiple counts of violating civil rights under the color of law. The community rejoiced. Protesters outside the courthouse chanted Marcus's name, along with those of the other victims. For the first time in years, people felt their voices had been heard. But even in handcuffs, Cross remained defiant. He insisted he was innocent, claiming he was being framed by anti-police activists. His supporters rallied online, painting him as a hero unfairly targeted. The stage was set for a trial that would divide the community and put the entire justice system under a microscope. Because here's the truth. Officer Cross's case was just the tip of the iceberg. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered signs that he wasn't acting alone. Whispers of a larger network of officers. Cover-ups that stretched far beyond one man. And a shocking possibility that planting evidence wasn't an isolated act, but part of a culture that had gone unchecked for years. What came next would expose a scandal that reached higher than anyone ever imagined. The arrest of Officer Daniel Cross sent shockwaves through the community. But as investigators dug deeper, it became clear that his crimes were not the actions of a lone rogue cop. Instead, they uncovered something far more disturbing. A culture of corruption, cover-ups, and officers who had been protecting one another for years. Marcus Hill's case was the spark, but what it revealed next would expose a scandal that shook the entire police department to its core. After Cross's arrest, more and more victims stepped forward. Old cases resurfaced, some dating back a decade. Defense attorneys began combing through records, searching for patterns, and they found them. Multiple officers in Cross's precinct had reported unusually high numbers of drug arrests. Several had suspiciously similar reports. Vague traffic stops, sudden discoveries, and defendants who swore the drugs weren't theirs. It was no longer a whisper network. It was a roar. One of Cross's former partners, Officer Bradley Kemp, came under scrutiny. His name appeared on dozens of arrest reports where drugs were discovered during routine stops. When investigators subpoenaed Kemp's bodycam footage, they found several suspicious gaps. In one video, the recording conveniently cut off for 3 minutes. Right before the moment, he claimed to have found heroin under a driver's seat. In another, the camera's audio mysteriously went silent, but the footage showed Kemp fumbling with his vest near the very pocket where small bags were later found. The evidence suggested Kemp wasn't just a bystander. He was an active participant. Inside the department, tensions boiled over. Some officers broke ranks, admitting privately that they had long suspected Cross and his circle were dirty. But others stood by them. The union doubled down, arguing that good cops were being crucified for doing their jobs. This code of silence, the infamous blue wall, made it nearly impossible to know just how deep the corruption ran. Were Cross and Kemp anomalies, or were they just the tip of an iceberg nobody wanted to see? Meanwhile, the human cost became undeniable. An investigative journalist uncovered case after case where people had lost everything because of planted evidence. One man had served 5 years in prison before being deported, only to learn now that the drugs he was convicted of possessing may have been planted. Another, a single mother named Latasha Brown, had her children taken by Child Protective Services after Cross's arrest report accused her of endangering minors with narcotics. With every story, the outrage grew louder. The community realized this wasn't about one bad officer. It was about an entire system willing to sacrifice innocent lives to appear tough on crime. When Cross finally went to trial, the courtroom was packed. Victims and their families filled the benches, waiting for justice. The prosecution laid out a damning case. Bodycam footage false reports, and testimony from victims whose lives had been destroyed. But the defense painted a different picture. They claimed Cross was a decorated officer, a man who had taken hundreds of criminals off the streets. They argued the bodycam videos were misinterpreted or taken out of context. And Cross himself took the stand, defiantly declaring, "I never planted anything. This is a political witch hunt." The jury watched, torn between two versions of the truth. Midway through the trial, prosecutors dropped a bombshell. An anonymous whistleblower from inside the department leaked documents showing that supervisors had been warned about Cross's tactics years earlier. Internal memos revealed complaints from fellow officers who suspected he was planting evidence. But instead of disciplining him, the department promoted him, praising his exceptional drug arrest record. It wasn't just Cross. It wasn't just Kemp. It was the system itself. As these revelations hit the media, outrage turned into fury. Protests swelled. The FBI expanded their probe beyond Cross, targeting his entire unit. Rumors spread that even higher-ranking officials might have covered up the misconduct to protect their statistics and federal funding. Marcus Hill, the man whose nightmare had started it all, spoke at a rally outside the courthouse. "This isn't just about me. This is about every innocent person whose life was stolen by a badge that was supposed to protect them. We won't stop until the whole truth comes out." And then, just when it seemed things couldn't get darker, investigators uncovered sealed evidence from a case nearly a decade old. A case tied not only to Officer Cross, but to a mysterious disappearance connected to one of his arrests. Was it possible that what began as drug planting could be linked to something far more sinister? The truth, once revealed, would shake the entire city and change the way people looked at law enforcement forever. The trial of Officer Daniel Cross gripped the nation. For weeks, courtroom testimony revealed a chilling picture, not just of one rogue cop, but of a system that had enabled him. Officers admitted under oath that they'd looked the other way. Prosecutors conceded they had ignored inconsistencies. And Cross himself, sitting stone-faced at the defense table, showed no remorse. The jury deliberated less than a day. Guilty on every count. When the verdict was read, gasps echoed through the courtroom. Some wept, others cheered. Marcus and Terrence sat side by side, holding back tears of their own. For them, it wasn't just justice for one man. It was vindication for all the lives ruined by a broken system. But the fallout didn't end with Cross. The FBI report forced the district attorney's office to review more than 120 convictions tied to him and his partners. Dozens were overturned, families reunited, wrongfully accused citizens walked free, and the scandal spread. Internal Affairs uncovered at least 3 other officers who had used similar tactics. They, too, faced criminal charges. The blue wall cracked. The department was forced to announce sweeping reforms. Mandatory third-party audits of evidence, stricter bodycam protocols, and a civilian oversight board with the power to investigate misconduct. For the first time, it felt like change was possible. Terrence eventually got his scholarship back. His coach called him the strongest player he'd ever known. The single mother regained custody of her children. The factory worker returned to his job and received a public apology. And Marcus? He became an activist, traveling across the country. He spoke at universities, police reform panels, and community rallies. His message was simple. The truth only matters if someone's willing to fight for it. Officer Daniel Cross was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. The department never fully recovered from the scandal. But for the people whose lives he tried to destroy, the verdict was more than punishment. It was proof that even when the system seems untouchable, the truth can break through. And as Marcus stood on the courthouse steps, looking out at the crowd, chanting his name, he finally felt the weight lift from his shoulders. This wasn't just the end of his nightmare. It was the beginning of something bigger. The system had been forced to see itself in the mirror. And for once, it couldn't look away.